Good evening, this is Dr. Jimmy again. Yes, earlier today I made a lovely video for you, part of my History of Halloween Horror Nights 25, part 13. Ooh, scary. What was that? Spooks! No, actually, there's a large cardboard box on the floor. We got something that was shipped in a very large cardboard box. You probably are aware of the fact, if you put a large cardboard box empty on the floor in a house with a kitty living in the house, the box becomes the property of the pussy in question. And she is now inhabiting it and sometimes pounces at it. There, speaking of pouncing, she just pounced on me. Hello, Lenny. And this will be pouncing and jumping on the box and jumping in the box, and there's like a hole in the side of the box already, and if you take a little bit of sort of a string or something and wiggle it on the side of it, suddenly comes through the hole, and it's very dangerous and frightening. But kitties like cardboard boxes. I don't know why. They have a thing for cardboard boxes. So that's what that strange poltergeisty noise was. Well, it's Dr. Jimmy lurking in the dark with the glowing eyes effect happening. There she goes in the box again. Funny cat. And this is the, as I said, it's the same day that earlier I made that 13th video in my History for Halloween Horror Nights 25. This is not the 14th video. I don't really like coming out here in the middle of the dark to do these, but at least it's not unlucky 13. When I did that one, it was like the sky was falling, thunder and lightning. I thought, you know, maybe God got fed up with Dr. Jimmy, was getting ready to get me. But, oh look, still wearing the shirt, trick or treat. I do like this one, very adorable. But let's see, it's still the 3rd of August. That means it's still 6 weeks to Horror Nights. And at last I can get to another HHN 28 house cocktail. Yes, that's what this is. Of course, it said that on the front, so you probably already knew that. But this is time for me to make my next house cocktail. It's been a while since they announced the house. Slaughter Sinema. That was the, I believe, the 4th announced house, and an original, and I hadn't got around to getting the ingredients, and that was what was preventing me from doing I don't have the damn measuring thing out here. Stupid Jimmy. I brought out the bottles and the glass and the ice and the spoon, and I'm going to make a cocktail for you. I don't have the little shot glass. I need that to, you know, pour in and then put it into, you know, so I need that. I have to go get it. So, Lenny, entertain the nice people with paranormal activities while I'm getting the thing. I hope that the kitty, you know, what she should have done while I was gone was to leap up here somehow and with levitation and glowing eyes and frighten all of you. Probably didn't. She's probably still in the damn box. But that would have been fun. But trouble is, cats getting to perform on demand is not the best. Anyway, so 2 haunted houses have actually been announced in the past recently. We've had Slaughter Sinema, and more recently Carnival Graveyard Rust in Pieces, and I had all that I need for both cocktails. I don't believe I'll be doing both tonight, because I've been watching telly and doing other things, and enjoying the old movie that I rented on Voodoo called Little Women. I know it doesn't seem like the sort of thing I would watch, but it's the Catherine Hepburn in 1933. And if that character wasn't meant to be a lesbian, then I don't know what's wrong with my imagination. I mean, it seems obvious to me, even though it wasn't obvious to anyone at the time, but oh well. Looks like fun movie, actually. Lots of kittens in the movie. Lots of kittens. There's baskets full of kittens. That might be why I was watching it. I like a movie has cats in it, especially like if the cats are a big part of the story. Not so much this one, but had cats in it. Fluffy kittens. Hello, Lenny. Lenny's. Don't knock the stuff over. You knock the stuff over, I have to pick it up off the floor, and the floor is all the way down there on the ground. Bloody. You silly cat. What? Silly cat. Alright, so, getting to it though, this will be the video for Slaughter Sinema only. And at some point later, maybe later today, but I don't think so, probably tomorrow night, I'll make a one for the other haunted house recently announced, the Carnival Graveyard Rust and Pieces. But tonight's will be for Slaughter Sinema. And as you may recall, the haunted house is set in a drive-in cinema somewhere, probably Cary, Ohio. I'm not sure yet, but I have a strong suspicion about that. At least some of the movies were shot there, apparently. Mysterious movies, like Pumpkin Guts is one of them, and the other one was called Amazon Cannibals from Planet Hell. And then, of course, The Beast Baby. That Beast Baby. Oh, yes. Sort of reminds me of an Edward Gorey, The Beastly Baby in Edward Gorey. I like that. I don't know if it's inspired from that or not. I recommend looking up The Beastly Baby by Edward Gorey. It's delightful. All right. Now, contemplating the haunted house, which is set in a drive-in cinema, and we are told, in addition to those 3 films, which don't really exist, to be playing in the drive-in cinema. When you first go into the haunted house, there is a concession stand, and that's where the house starts, and the aroma of popcorn, hot buttered popcorn, sort of fills the area. And if you've ever read a lovely book about a drive-in cinema by that, damn it, I can't remember the name again. I hate when that happens. There's a fellow who writes a lot of Western fiction, and sometimes Western-themed horror and science fiction. Something that was a show on television. It's a black guy and a white guy who were like cowboys, and also they were gay, and they were solving mysteries together or something. It was set in Texas, or sort of a strange sort of story considering. But let me take a look. I'll probably get the name. It's sometimes, you know, I've got this device. I might as well make use of it. Let's see. The name of the novel I'm thinking of is simply called The Drive-In. That makes it easy. And there was a bloody hell. It doesn't seem to realise I'm looking for a book. Not at the drive-in. It's the. Don't they know? Doesn't Google notice I put a fucking definitive article on it? Son of a bitch. All right. I'm going to put in novel, and maybe there it is. As I start to write in, his name is Lansdale, Joe R. Lansdale, and he wrote a lovely sort of science fiction horror movie, not a book, but it reads like one of those schlocky movies from the time period called The Drive-In, about some very bizarre shit that happens in a drive-in cinema in Texas. And some of it involves popcorn that becomes sort of alien possessed. I'm not quite sure how to describe it, but people eat it and it affects their minds in weird ways. Sort of blood corn, rather horrific. I recommend the book, but I thought of that the moment they evoke the popcorn odor in this particular drive-in cinema in this haunted house. So I'm thinking popcorn, and my first thought was to get something with a popcorn flavor. And yes, there is a popcorn flavored vodka, a 360 brand. It's popcorn flavored, but unfortunately the distributors who bring the bottles to this part of the world won't bring this here. I don't know why. Shops like ABC and Total Wine, they look it up and they see it exists, but they can't get it because the distributor refuses to carry it into this market, even though they carry it in a market like, oh, you know, so many miles to the west. I'm sorry, east. That's that way. No, east is that way. East is that way, yes, from where I'm sitting. To the east, and in Melbourne, Australia. No, Australia, that would be the other direction. No, that would be that way, straight down. No, Melbourne, Florida, over on the Space Coast, over on the east coast of Florida, over there. Melbourne over there happens to have the type of vodka, but I'm not going to drive all the way fuck over to Melbourne for a bottle of vodka and do that. Sorry. And I don't send away for liquor through the post because it gets broken. Nasty things can happen in the post. And sometimes my packages go to the wrong place because the delivery people are stupid sometimes. And so I'm not going to mess about with that. Instead, I had to come up with a different idea. So I'm trying to be creative. I'm thinking movies, concession stands, and then I remember when I'm a young man back in the 70s and 80s, during that same era when this sort of films were being made in the 80s, and going sometimes to drive-ins, but usually to a sort of creepy little theatres that showed some of the awfulest movies, and sometimes there'd be people like living in the cinema that were always there and you worry about them, and strange activities happening in the back rows that made the floor sticky, and you not quite sure if that's someone's soda pop or fizzy drink that they spilled, but it might be something else that they, spilled. Clean up on aisle 5, protein spill. Yeah, exactly. Ew. And so you're stepping about, and it's sticky. And I'm thinking in that sort of shoddy places, I would often go to the concession stand, the snack bar in the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. And I would get this little box, rectangular yellow box of chocolate-covered raisins called Raisinets, the movie candy. That's how they used to promote it on telly, but in the commercials back in the 80s, and used to see us. Raisinets, the movie candy. And it's like, wow, I go to a movie, I have some Raisinets. And so I would do that. And it was like, it became associated in my consciousness with the cinema and going to the movies, watching especially lots of disturbing horror movies back in the 80s. Watching all this stuff and munching the Raisinets in the spooky dark. Oh yes, that's my habitat, the spooky dark. Like horror nights, we go out once more into the spooky dark, yes, in that cold air-conditioned room, waiting, exhilarating at the silver scream. Oh, look, here comes the usher. Yes, tickets, please. Yes, exactly. That's what it's sort of. So I get those Raisinets, and I'm thinking that might be what I need. Not popcorn flavour cocktail for the movies, but a Raisinette flavoured. How could I evoke a Raisinette in a cocktail? So I decided to come up with something, trying to think how I could recreate raisinets in alcoholic booze form, and I figured it out. So first, and it's rather interesting because this is like cheap, schlocky movie, and its raisinets are, you know, not exactly like French macaroons or anything. You know, it's not very fancy, and yet to make this cocktail taste like raisinets, I've got some of the most elegant ingredients. So it's sort of like making a bologna sandwich out of caviar and you know, escargot or something. It's just taking something. But here we are. This is of course, it's kind of dark in here. Maybe that'll help you. So here we have this lovely bottle of brandy. It is in fact cognac Courvoisier VSOP. It's very nice, very good stuff. And so I'm going to put some. Oh man, that's good. Put some of that in this little shot glass. Let me see if you can see what I'm doing. Put some in the shot glass. So I get, oops, spilled. Oh dear. Well, sticky floors is what you have in the cinema. So I get some of this, and then I pour that into a prepared rocks glass with ice. So put that in there. So I've got the brandy in the rocks glass. All right. Did I bring any sort of paper towels with me? I'd have a spillage. Then I needed the other part of the raisin. Put the cork in the brandy so I don't spill any more. The other bit was this, and I did a lot of research and checked out many different varieties of chocolate liqueurs of various sorts, from Godiva to many different types of creme de cacao. But I decided what I wanted was something that was very lush, very rich, and was a chocolate cream liqueur specifically, because it's like milk chocolate on top of those raisins. And I decided finally on this lovely thing. It's called Belle Gabrielle. It's French, or so is the cognac. Belle Gabrielle Chocolatier, chocolate specialty. It's a very, very lovely bottle here, very elegant. And this too got a cork, chocolate here. And so take some of this, and this is a chocolate liqueur, but it is a chocolate cream liqueur. And as you can see, as I pour it into the shot glass, it almost looks like chocolate milk there. And so it put that into the rocks glass on top of the brandy. Put the cork in that one. All right. And what I'll do then is I shall stir it nicely. And I hope this will have the desired effect. But just to be sure, after stirring and blending an equal amount of both, I am going to then taste it with a spoon to see just a smidge more brandy. Just a smidge. And I'm just going to put that directly in. That's probably the bit you spilled on the desk. Yeah. Yep. and then stir that up again, and then yes, that's better. And then we have here this cocktail for Slaughter Sinema, which containing brandy and a chocolate cream liqueur, which I mixed and tasted while I was mixing it to make sure it came out just right. Has a flavour that evokes the candy Raisinets, the movie candy, something that I've always associated with going to the movies, because yes, brandy, of course, is, well, it's brandy, it's made from grapes, but the flavour of brandy is a lot more, it's richer and than the flavor. Well, to me, it's always been like wine to brandy is like grapes to raisins. I know it sounds funny, but there's a flavour in raisin that reminds me that's similar to that. And of course, very often what you do with raisins is that you pour brandy on them, and then you light them on fire, and then you try to eat them before you burn yourself for Christmas, which is a strange, spooky game because the fire in the dark is like this blue flame. It's called Snapdragon. Used to be a big Christmas game in Britain. I think I talked about it on a different video once before, but you can look it up, and there's some videos showing people playing it. It looks quite spooky. It'd be great for Halloween. But for me, the flavour of raisins and brandies are very close. And of course, with the liqueur added to it, you get something that it comes close to the flavour of Raisinets and chocolate-covered raisins, especially after a couple of swallows, because any cocktail starts to mellow after you've had a couple of swallows, because the liquor flavour, the stronger part of it, you know, you get a little inebriated, and then it gets more mellow, and then the flavours come through, and yeah, it does. It does. It's got that really good cocoa aftertaste, like you've been eating the Raisinets, and you get that flavour of the chocolate in the back of your throat after you chewed up the raisin. And that's exactly how it feels. Except it's not chewy, of course. It's liquid. So yes, I've succeeded in making an alcoholic beverage, quite potent, I should say, also, that tastes like something you'd eat in the movies. Now, I don't know if you can make a snow cap cocktail. I never really liked the snow caps. It's a little white hard candies. It's got on top of the chocolate. But these always, Raisinets for me was movie candy, and oh yes, very good, very, very good. And of course the popcorn, but I couldn't find the right vodka. I suppose I could have made some popcorn, and then I could, you know, hot buttered popcorn and put it in the vodka and let it infuse for a bit. But sometimes when you infuse vodka yourself, it can come out a little bad. Sometimes it works wonderfully, sometimes it gets a little rancid, and ooh, that's not what I wanted. So sometimes, that's why they sell flavoured vodka, because you experiment at home and sometimes it goes off, and then it's ew, and you have to pour it down the sink. And me, I never have the heart to pour liquor down the sink. I end up drinking it anyway, and then sometimes you become violently ill. So, so Slaughter Sinema sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it tremendously. I think this would be exciting house with all the schlocky movies, and I do suspect that there'll be a bit more than 3 movies. I'm not certain, but I have a suspicion that the 3 that they told us about are not all of the movies that are playing in the cinema. and they might have a couple other scenes or other advertisements or trailers or posters. There was something whisper about something about a sorority house. Now, it might have to do with one of the three movies that we've seen the posters for, but in my mind I was thinking, you know, sorority vampires like the Tao sisters from Castle Vampire. Or, although I don't know, you can't connect everything to everything, so don't always assume that every time something pops up it's going to be connected to every other thing they've ever done with that theme, because that's not always the case. But I was also thinking of a movie called Black Christmas, which took place in a sorority. There's a lot of sorority, rather creepy, disturbing sorority scene. There was one movie, was it Slumber Party Massacre? It was directed by a woman who was a feminist, mind you, but she made one of the most extreme slasher movies. And people who are saying, oh, these movies are misogynist, they're all about cutting up women, and they see this movie, oh my God, that's the worst yet. And then they find out that it was directed by a woman as sort of a parody of that thing. But, I mean, they took the sexual metaphor to an extreme with a power drill that was like always positioned in the most phallic way possible in the kills. I think it was called Slumber Party Massacre. It was Penelope Spheris directed that, I think. Anyway, Slumber Party Massacres. It was meant to be a bit camp, I think, but it was brutal, but at the same time was also a bit of a parody of the genre. But I never bought the misogynist argument when people like Ebert and Siskill notoriously attacked the Friday the 13th franchise, saying, oh my goodness, it's all about killing women. You know, some man who's been somehow humiliated, he can't cope with female power, and so gets upset when they start acting independently and has to kill them all. And the brutish thugs in the audience, these dirty men, are going to watch and root for the guy. Yeah, get her. And it's all shot from the killer's POV, which means, aha, you're identifying with this person who probably has a tiny penis, and that's why he has to use a knife. That was the sort of arguments they were making. But then they said, not Halloween, though. We like that movie, so it's okay. Even though most of the tropes they're talking about were actually in Halloween, not all of them, like the POV stuff. And when they did the special, most of the clips they showed were from Halloween, to give an example of the sort of naughty thing that isn't in this movie, but it looks kind of like this. But I mean, it was so ridiculous. And Friday the 13th isn't even about that. It's about an angry mum who's upset that her boy was killed, because the teenager's supposed to be watching her little boy who was mentally challenged, and he went swimming and drowned, and so she's taking revenge on those teenagers who are busy getting it on. And their idea that she was going after girls is ridiculous, because if you do a bit of a count, you realize she kills as many or more men than women in the movie. Which, when you stop, oh, wait a minute. And that's also true if you go through many of the earlier Friday the 13th movies. But of course, then it's Jason afterwards. But it's not like he has a thing against girls, because that's not his modus. There were movies like this, but they tend to come out after Siskill and Ebert complained. It's almost like some filmmakers watched that sneak previews and said, hey, that's a good idea, we'll do that. And they started making some of the movies that some people will swear at me because there are people who see, you know, Ebert as a saint. Um, but this transgression that he and Siskill did as a youngster, where they, in the first start of the career, where they misrepresented films, misrepresented them. What am I? Lied, basically. They reviewed films that they never actually watched. They reviewed films when they walked out of the cinema and didn't sit through it. Not even the whole movie, not even majority of the movie. They talked about movies that hadn't come out yet, claiming, oh, this is a movie about hillbillies killing women. And it was The Howling, which wasn't about that at all. It was about werewolves. But they saw poster art, and so they made an assumption, and they said that on the show as if this is a fact. And they said things about movies that they had seen that were simply not true. And they knew better, because they saw Friday. They knew that it was a woman doing the killing in that movie, and it had nothing to do with the scenario they set up. But they didn't like Friday the 13th. And they tried to have the movie destroyed. They tried to wreck the career of Betsy Palmer, and thought that she should be ashamed for having ever been in the movie, and started a write-in campaign to harass her. You know, nowadays it would be on the internet, but back then, before there was one, they had people write letters and attack the people who had made the movie. So that's why I have a problem with them. But there's no need to go on about that. But that was part of the era of Slaughter Sinema. The era in the 80s and these early wave of horror movies, the sort of more violent, somewhat schlocky movies, but some of them became huge, like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. But some of them made one or two movies, or just one and no sequels, and they disappeared after that. And many of them are quite amazing. Many of Wes Craven's early pictures, like The Hills Have Eyes, and I thought of that when I saw some of the poster artwork for Amazon Women from Planet Hell. It sort of reminded me of some of the strange things in The Hills Have Eyes, although it's not really well, they're not Amazons, but they're cannibal people living in the desert. And they have names like Mars and Pluto, which are the names of planets, although they got them from Roman mythology. But the best part about The Hills Have Eyes is the German Shepherd dog, who has a flashback and and you know, is obviously remembers things like a human, and is that's just a terrific thing, because you don't expect that sort of thing. It's what you expect from a Disney children's movie where a dog has a flashback and it's like Benji or something, but it's in this sort of extreme gory horror movie with crucifixions and mutilations and, you know, all sorts of horrible torture and death and cannibalism. So it's like, eat the baby. Yes, that sort of movie with the dog having its flashback. So it's terrific, and that's exactly Wes Craven. Some of his early movies before were quite bizarre. Of course, it's the same sense of humor that made Freddy Krueger and then the Scream films. So you see, he's made some very bizarre movies in his early career. Some were very brutal, like Last House on the Left, but also he made films like Deadly Friend, with the famous death by basketball scene, and the one with wait a minute, was that That was George Romero, the one with the monkey shines. What was the Craven film I'm trying to remember from that era that was similar to that? Mm, pre Freddy. Shocker came after Freddy. Nothing to do with those finger things. The Shocker had to do with the electric chair thing. But there was some great great movies from that era that are fitting to this sort of thing in the house. The Beast Baby reminds me specifically of a film made by, I think his name was Cohen. Not Leonard Cohen, who did Hallelujah, that's a musician, but there was somebody with a similar name. Something like, but I think his name was Cohen. But a very similar name. Like, let me just type this in. He made lots of very interesting horror movies. Larry Cohen. Right. I knew it was very similar to Leonard Cohen, except, of course, he wasn't, you know, the musician who wrote the famous song. This is Larry Cohen, who made a lot of very weird little schlocky horror movies, but they have a lot of stuff going on in it. Stuff was one of them, about the killer ice cream. But he also made one about a flying serpent based on Aztec mythology called Q. Q is short for Quetzalcoatl. But my favorite, though, is the thing I think Beast Baby has been inspired by. It's called It's Alive. And I love the advert for that. Showed a little bassinet, and it shows the bassinet. I don't remember the name of the people in the movie. Let's just say the name was Edwards, okay? Don't know if that was the name. Could have been Smith. It could have been, you know, Farkas. It could have been any sort of silly name. But let's just say it was Edwards. So you see this beautiful bassinet and this lovely, lovely lullaby, tinkling lullaby music playing. Da, 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 da. And you see this bassinet. It's all dark though, but you see this. It's all pale wicker and it's spinning slowly around. And you hear the voiceover saying, "There's only one thing wrong with the Edwards baby." And as it comes around, you see on one side of it a huge pointy claw hanging out of the bassinet. Pointy claw. "There's only one thing wrong with the Edwards baby. It's alive!" Yes, the movie was called It's Alive. And it featured a horrible beast baby. A woman gives birth and the baby eats the doctor right away. It tears up the delivery room and all sorts of blood and mayhem. And I think it's John Saxon, who was Nancy's dad in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Not sure. I'd go look it up again, but I don't feel like it. I've been looking at the phone too much. I think it was John Saxon. I may be wrong. I have to double check, and then if I do that, I'll know what the name of the baby is. I mean, the name of the characters. Well, was it John Saxon? Come on, bring up the damn thing. Cast. No, it wasn't. It was John Ryan. There's a slight resemblance. I think that was the guy. John Ryan, who played the baby's dad, Frank. And Davis. So it's the Davis baby. There's only one thing wrong with the Davis baby. So it wasn't Edwards, it was Davis. It's alive. And so it was John Ryan who played Frank Davis. For some reason I was seeing John Saxon in my mind. They're similar in some ways, I suppose. Saxon, of course, played Nancy's dad in Nightmare on Elm Street. And if you remember all the way back to the early 70s, he was in the Kung Fu movie with Bruce Lee and Jim Kelly, and in the Enter the Dragon. So oh my, it's 14 minutes already. I haven't finished the cocktail yet, though. I have to finish the cocktail for you. So, it's alive, horrible mutant demon baby, and he has to try and track it down to kill it, but then he doesn't want to kill it because it's his own spawn after all, and the baby seems to recognize this as his dad, but he kills and eats people because he's a beast baby. It's rather touching, yeah, in some weird ways. It's a bizarre movie, but Cohen had a way of making schlock, which was actually thought-provoking and interesting at the same time. There were levels to the schlock that made you go, wait a minute. And subtext that was relevant. You wouldn't expect that in this sort of thing. So I do recommend those sorts of movies, but these are movies from my youth, the 70s and 80s, just the sort of thing that this house is supposed to represent, and that's why I brought them up. Movies like The Burning, you know, with the snip snip, Sleepaway Camp, that's a good one too, with surprise penis at the end of it. Oh, did I spoil it? I might not have spoiled it. You might not know what I mean when I say that. What does that mean, surprise penis? Then you see the movie and go, oh, that's what he meant. Oh, my God. Yeah. Terrific, wonderful stuff from that era. And so that's what the house is going to be. And I've given all kinds of recommendations and books and movies, so I think I've done a good job in trying to get you to, what's the word I'm looking for? Edify your taste into the more erudite levels of schlock. And so I'm just about done. Ooh. And classy ingredients for a cocktail that tastes like movie candy. But it worked quite well. Just like Raisinets. So that was the cocktail for Slaughter Sinema. And next cocktail video, which will probably be tomorrow. What time is it? Already 10? Yeah, it's past 10. Next cocktail video will probably be tomorrow. And tomorrow night. It's a Saturday night. There isn't much on telly. So I have no problem. And that will be for Carnival Graveyard, Rust in Pieces. And I had to think about rust, carnivals to some degree, but also about those dangerous doggies that are going to be in the house. So, got an idea for that, which I think will work out nicely. And that'll be tomorrow, I believe. And before tomorrow night, there might even be part 14. And if something gets announced, there might be something else as well. I don't know. Waiting for the announcement. But I expect announcements will be coming out not too long, because it's August. And Horror Nights is, you know, only in 6 weeks. So something's got to get announced not too long, because they've only got a little bit to announce it all left. So this is the month that all the announcements will get made, I'm sure. All right. So with all that said, the usual disclaimer. Yeah. If you're going to booze them, then you need to be legal age. Legal age 21 or older, and no operating motor cars after getting schlocked. or lawnmowers, or teleportation devices. Because even when you're sober, you get into one of those things with a fly, you come out. You know, imagine what happens if you go into one of those things damn drunk. You know, you might come out with, 6 octopi legs on one side, a virgin hippopotamus on the other, and a big giraffe sticking up out of your rib cage or something. It could be a whole damn menagerie. Try saying menagerie when you're drunk. I'm not drunk yet. It's only one cocktail. Whatever it is. Anyway, it would be quite embarrassing and not the sort of thing that's approved in polite society to go through any matter teleportation devices whilst inebriated, because God knows what you might end up with. So, responsibility in consuming of alcoholic beverages is what we're trying to get at here. And it's just a disclaimer for the benefit of my lawyers. And now I bid you all good night, pleasant screams, and 6 weeks, kids. See you in the spooky dark.